Do you have a hard time with feedback? I'm one of those people. I don't know how many times people are like, I have some feedback for you. And I'm like, oh no, I really don't want to hear it. And I know intellectually I'm the kind of person who wants feedback. I want to continue to learn. I want to continue to grow. But I'm going to be honest, feedback is really hard sometimes. So if you're one of those people in that boat that has a hard time with feedback, let's talk more about it today and how it can be more helpful for you and how you can be less emotionally tied to what people say about you. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Amber Deibert. I'm a performance coach for enterprise and strategic account executives. I help with mindset and productivity. And feedback is a really big piece of the mindset. You need to feel psychological safety in your workplace. And if you feel like you're unable to accept feedback, you need feedback, feedback is hard, maybe you've gotten feedback that you didn't like, then that's a really big piece of you feeling safe in the workplace to be able to perform at your best. In this episode, I'm going to break down the 3 different types of feedback. I'm also going to talk about why feedback is so hard to hear and how to stop spiraling emotionally when you get feedback and how to use it to your advantage. By the end, you'll know how exactly to tell what type of feedback you're getting and how to separate out the signal from the noise. Let's dive right in. Okay, so as someone who doesn't like feedback, I have ADHD. Sometimes a part of ADHD is something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I use pretty much anything that somebody else will do to feel rejected, to feel like I'm not good enough. And feedback is definitely a big piece of that. Whenever I would get feedback in the workplace, or even now today as a business owner, I would feel like cringy and like, oh no, they found me out. My imposter syndrome would come raging up of like, they found me out, that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm not good enough, I'm not meant to be here. And it would just bring up all this shame when really it was like actually a very small thing that was happening. So what did I do? I read a book. There's a book called Thank You for the Feedback. It's by Douglas Stone and Sheila Heen. And they break it all down. It's a fantastic book. Highly recommend it if you're someone who wants to get better at listening to feedback, taking it in and not getting so triggered by it. So first, let me tell you what feedback actually is. In a past life, I was doing leadership development. I was training new managers on how to be great managers. And one really big part of being a manager is feedback. So in the learning and development world, there's 2 different kinds of feedback. There's reinforcing feedback and there's redirecting feedback. And I want to just lay this out for you as someone who's receiving feedback so that you can see what's really happening here. So when I think about my job as a manager, my job is to theoretically get my people to walk down a path. So I think about like, okay, we're all on a hike. I want my people to walk down a path. This is the path that they need to follow. And if they're following the path, great. And if they're not following the path, then we need to give some feedback. So there's 2 different kinds of feedback, reinforcing feedback and redirecting feedback. So if I think about my people walking on a path, if people continue to walk down the path, I'm going to reinforce the behaviors that they're doing. I'm going to reinforce that you're doing it right. This is exactly it. This is what you should be doing. Keep going. Like, fantastic. I want you to keep doing that. However, if somebody starts veering off the path and going a different direction, then I want to give them redirecting feedback. I want to redirect them to the path and let them know this is the path. I want to give a disclaimer here. There are so many managers out there that are really bad at feedback. I'm not going to say that your manager is fantastic at giving reinforcing feedback or even giving you redirecting feedback. It's not a skill that people have naturally, and managers have to learn this too. So hopefully you have a manager who's good at this, and if you don't, I'm sorry, but I want you to think about it this way. There's redirecting feedback and there's reinforcing feedback. We tend to think of it as good feedback or bad feedback. I'm doing a good job or I'm doing a bad job. And that's just not the case. I want to give an example. So I was on the hiring team at a unicorns tech startup. We grew from 100 people to 1,700 people in 1 year. And I was a big part of training up these people, being part of the hiring team to get them on board. And it was really fascinating to me to see the whole almost life cycle of a person. I could see them from when they came in, when they were interviewed. I could see them from when they were learning the job, figuring out the job. I could see them when they were fully ramped and doing the job. And then a lot of them I saw go out the door. And it was fascinating to me because there were certain people who had traits that were a horrible fit for our organization, but those traits would have been exactly what they needed someplace else. So for example, there was someone who was very, very detailed. I was working with the customer support team. Every single support ticket that they went through, this person was incredibly detailed, checked every single thing, double checked, and they were not a good fit for our organization because we were this fast growing startup. It was not a fit because we needed you to work super, super quickly. However, if this same person was doing that same behavior at maybe like a financial institute or something else where you really need to be very thorough in your cases, they would have been a perfect fit. So I want you to remind yourself that the feedback that you're getting is context specific. This is not about you being a good person or a bad person. This is not about you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. This is about at this particular organization, the path that you follow is a certain path, and are you on that path or are you not on that path? And you may be not on that path, but your behaviors may be perfect for a different environment. It's not that you're a good person or a bad person. I really want you to get this black and white thinking out of your head, because this is going to help with the feedback so much more. And if you continually get redirecting feedback that you're doing the quote unquote wrong things, or that the way you're doing things is not how they're done here, then it may just be an environment mismatch. It may be that you're not in the right place for you, and a different environment would be a much better fit for you. But again, it's not about right and wrong. It's not about good and bad. It's redirecting or reinforcing. Okay, so the authors of Thank You for the Feedback, which if you're like me, or just cringe at the title even, Thank You for the Feedback. The authors point out that there's 3 different types of feedback. And sometimes it's a mismatch in what you're looking for and what you're getting. And so sometimes that can create some fiction. So the 3 different types of feedback are: number 1, appreciation. This sounds like I see you and I value you. This is that reinforcing feedback that we've been talking about. The second type of feedback is coaching feedback. Here's how you could improve. And then the third type of feedback is evaluation feedback. Here's where you stand. Are you on the path? Are you not on the path? What's going well? What's not going particularly well? So sometimes you might be expecting coaching feedback, but instead you're getting evaluation feedback. Or you might need a little bit more appreciation feedback, and instead you're getting coaching feedback. So sometimes that can create a lot of friction because you're not getting the type of feedback you want. And maybe even having a conversation with your manager in your next one-on-one of saying, you know what, I'm really self-aware. I know what I need. I do really well when I get that positive affirmation of what I'm doing well in this organization. That's how you're going to get the very best out of me. So check in with that. Maybe that's out of line. But what I find creates more of a spiral is when we feel triggered by feedback. And I really love how the authors of this book talk about the different things that can go wrong and why we might feel frustrated at the feedback that we're getting. So there are 3 triggers that block feedback. Number 1 is called the truth trigger. This is where you're thinking, that's just not true. What you're saying isn't even true. We'll go into this in just a minute. The second trigger is the relationship trigger. You're getting feedback from somebody that maybe you don't really respect, or somebody that you don't really admire. Or you're saying like, who are you to say that? You think I have a problem? Like, let me just turn the mirror back on you. And then the third trigger is the identity trigger. That whatever the feedback is threatens your perception of yourself. Maybe you think of yourself as someone being really thorough and somebody being very detail oriented, and then somebody points out where you missed the details or you weren't thorough enough. So let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about the truth trigger. You might be thinking, that's not even true. That's not even right. In this situation, the common thoughts are, they misunderstood me. That was not my intent. They didn't get the full story. They don't understand. In this situation, you tend to find yourself arguing the facts. When your emotions have calmed down, what I want you to do is take a look and see if maybe there is some truth in it. Maybe there's not, that's totally fine, but maybe there's like 10% of truth in there. It's really helpful to switch from going from a judgmental state to a curious and exploring state. And maybe the delivery of the feedback was really bad, but maybe you can step back and look at what was the intent of the feedback. Next is the relationship trigger. You're thinking, who are you to say that? You might be thinking, look at their track record, or they're just biased, or they've never supported me. Sometimes it's hard to accept feedback because of who is saying it, not necessarily even what they are saying. I think it can be really helpful to look at the actual feedback and decide, is this feedback that's worthwhile for me? Is this something that I want to pay attention to? Or is this something that I don't really care about? You get to decide what you do with feedback. You can decide to throw it out completely and have the consequences if there are any. Or you can decide, maybe I want to reframe how I'm looking at this, and maybe there is something valuable for me to learn. Maybe there is just 10% of this that I want to take away. Okay, the last and the one that shows up most for me is the identity trigger. This is where you feel threatened on how you see yourself. You're thinking, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm no good at this. They found me out that I'm an imposter. I'm making this all up. You might think I'm terrible at anything, at everything. This can be really hard because it hits right at your core identity of who you are and who you think you are and who you want to be. So it can be really helpful to zoom out and remind yourself, this is about one moment. This is not about me as a person. This is just a moment of time. You can recognize that growth is uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's just part of it. And then remember to root yourself in your identity. One of my favorite mantras for myself and for most of my clients is I have a 100% track record of always figuring it out. I always figure it out. I've always made it through every hard day. I'm someone who's cut out for this. I can do this. I've survived worse, harder things. Okay, so last thing I want you to know about feedback. First of all, it really helps to shift from judgment to curiosity. Ask yourself, is there something worthwhile that I can learn from this? You can ask for clarity if it feels vague or it feels off or you really want to understand. Feedback really helps you to understand your blind spots and then just take what's useful. Maybe 90% of it is garbage, and that's okay. You don't have to take all the feedback, but if there is something that's useful for you, take that. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope that this helped lighten the feedback that you're receiving and made you a little bit more easy to accept feedback. If you want to connect with me, you can come find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Amber Deibert. I'd love to hear how this episode or any other episode has affected you, and I'll see you in the next episode.